questions for Ms. Jogging?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. And here it is. Ms. Ross, you may proceed.
State calls Dr. Michelle DeMarco. Please, ma'am, do you swear or affirm the testimony you will give today in the matter of the state of Georgia versus Jose Ibarra, the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Yes, I do. You please take a seat, state, and spell your first and last name.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Dr. Michelle DeMarco, MICHELLEDIMARCO.
Good afternoon. Where are you employed?
I am currently employed at the Georgia Bureau of Investigation in the Medical Examiner's Office.
What are your duties and responsibilities there?
I am an associate medical examiner, so my duties include performing autopsies to determine the cause and manner of death, as well as testifying in court.
How long have you worked as a medical examiner for the Georgia Bureau of Investigation?
I've been an associate medical examiner for 3 years now.
Could you tell the court a little bit about your training and your education that qualifies you for your job?
Of course. So starting out back in college, I had a 4-year degree in a major in biology with minors in chemistry as well as biomedical physics. So I had my bachelor's degree in 2011. Following that, I did 4 years of medical school at the Medical University of South Carolina in Charleston, South Carolina, to get my MD degree, or medical doctor degree. Following that, I moved to Atlanta to have a 4-year residency at Emory. My 4-year residency was in anatomic pathology as well as clinical pathology. Following that 4-year residency, I entered my first fellowship. I spent a year at the Children's Hospital of Atlanta for a pediatric pathology fellowship. Following that, I entered my second fellowship with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation in forensic pathology.
Are you licensed to practice medicine in the state of Georgia?
Yes, I am,
How long have you been so licensed?
since residency training.
And what year is that?
I started residency in, oh gosh, what year was that? Sorry, I blanked. I started residency in 2015.
Are you board certified?
I am board certified. I am board certified in anatomic pathology, clinical pathology, pediatric pathology, and forensic pathology.
Do you belong to any professional organizations?
I have been a member in the past as a trainee when the memberships were free, but currently I am not paying any membership dues for those organizations.
Is it your duty to perform autopsies?
It is.
What is an autopsy?
So an autopsy, you can think of it as 3 components. So the first is our external examination, which consists of essentially a physical exam head to toe. Following that, we have our internal examination, where we will remove all of the organs and examine them and dissect them. Following the internal portion, we will collect evidence and submit testing such as toxicology, and that's kind of the third ancillary aspect of our autopsies. And our autopsies are performed to determine the cause and manner of death.
How many autopsies have you performed over the course of your career in training?
Over 1,000.
Have you previously been qualified before in a court of law as an expert in the fields of pathology and forensic pathology?
Yes, I have.
Approximately how many times?
Over 10.
And is this included in the Superior Courts of the state of Georgia? Have you
Yes.
testified as an expert in Georgia?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would tender Dr. DeMarco as an expert in the fields of pathology and forensic pathology.
The witness will be allowed to testify as an expert in the areas of pathology and forensic pathology.
And what is briefly pathology and forensic pathology?
Of course. So pathology is essentially the study of disease. My residency training was mostly spent in the hospital, in the pathology department, in the laboratory. So there's anatomic pathology, which is more so dealing with the tissues. So let's say, for example, you have a biopsy performed. A pathologist is the person that will oversee the lab that processes the biopsy and look at it under the microscope. In addition to that, anatomic pathology also includes autopsies. So there will be medical autopsies in the hospital that are performed. Clinical pathology, instead of dealing with diagnosing disease in the tissue, it's diagnosing disease in liquid. So if you get a blood test performed, that goes to a laboratory that is run by a pathologist to get your hemoglobin level, per se. Then forensic pathology is a subset of anatomic pathology that deals with medical legal autopsies, sudden unexplained deaths that are usually non-natural, but natural also occurs as well.
Were you the doctor that performed an autopsy on an individual named Laken Riley?
Yes, I was.
Would you tell the court, please, on what day and what time did you perform that autopsy?
On February 23rd at approximately 8:35 a.m.
Where was that autopsy performed?
At the GBI headquarters in Decatur, Georgia.
When you performed the autopsy on Laken Riley, did you photograph it?
Photographs were taken under my direction by our forensic photographer.
Thank you. And did you also produce a report summarizing your findings?
I did, yes.
And what is the unique case number that was assigned to Laken Riley? And did you use that unique case number in the photographs and in your report?
Yes, that unique case number was used throughout. May I refer to my report so I don't misstate the case number?
Yes, you may.
Thank you.
While she's looking at that, let me go ahead and make an announcement to the media that there will not be any photographs or any depiction of autopsy evidence going forward.
The case number is 2024-1005107.
And may I approach the witness, Your Honor? I'm sorry, I'm gonna approach the witness and I'm gonna hand you a series of photographs. And what we had done, Your Honor, is made multiple copies of the photographs. The defense counsel has some at their table so that they can follow along. I'm handing Dr. DeMarco states 299 through 218. And I ask if she recognizes those, and I'm gonna have a extra copy for the court so that she can talk about a photo, my number, and everybody can see it at the same time.
Okay.
Without having the need to publish the photos.
I understand, but is there, they haven't been admitted yet?
Not yet.
Okay, so I'm gonna leave them right here
Thank you,
until
sir.
they are.
Yes.
Okay.
I said that. Oh, 299 to 318. Do you recognize states 299 to 318?
Yes, I do.
What are they?
These are the photographs that were taken at the time of autopsy.
Of Laken Riley
Correct.
and her belongings? Or items that came in with her body, sorry.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
The state would, no, did they fairly and accurately depict Laken Riley and her body as you saw it on February 23rd of 2024?
Yes, they do.
State would move to admit states 299 to 318.
Very admitted.
And in lieu of publishing them over the Elmo, Your Honor, if you could take those, thank you, for the court. So let's start first with, could you tell the court in what condition did you receive Laken Riley's body?
Laken Riley was received to our office in a body bag with identifying tags on the zippers of the external surface.
And is that what we see in states 299?
Correct.
And in states 299, do you see that unique case number that you just read to us?
Yes.
States 300, could you tell us what we're looking at there?
Following the photographs that are taken of the tags on the bag, we will take as, quote unquote, as is photographs. So as we receive the body, we will take photos, how they come in. And that is photos 300 through 302.
So I want to talk to you about the condition of her body. First of all, were her hands bagged?
Yes.
And do you see those bags in states 300
Yes, and 301.
and 301? And what other, could you describe her body in terms of how was she clothed and what, if any, other items you saw around her hair?
She came in wearing pants, undergarments, as well as shoes and socks. She had a necklace on her neck as well. There was a hair tie in her hair, as well as admixed leaves and twigs, vegetative debris.
And are those items depicted in states 300? That is the vegetative debris. Do you see it at the top of states 300
Yes.
in her hair?
Yes.
All right. And then moving to states 302, does that depict her bottom part of her clothing, her leggings and her shoes?
Correct.
All right. Could you please describe Laken Riley in terms of age, height, and weight?
May I refer to my report for height and weight, just so I'm accurate? She was 22-year-old female, 64 inches or 5'4", and 143 pounds.
Did you observe any injuries to Laken Riley?
I did.
Can you globally describe them, and then we'll cover them in more detail. Globally describe the injuries that you saw, just in general terms.
So Laken exhibited blunt force head trauma, as well as signs of asphyxia.
What is asphyxia?
Asphyxia is essentially the inability to deliver oxygen to your tissues and cells.
And what types of actions can cause asphyxia? Where do you see asphyxial deaths?
Asphyxial deaths can be seen in hangings, which are ligature strangulation. They can be seen in manual strangulation, as well as neck compression, either by somebody using their arm or doing an arm bar or chokehold or something like that.
And at times, as a medical examiner, are you able to determine what type of asphyxia caused or contributed to a victim's death?
In cases where we have good autopsy findings that would allow us to categorize them into one of those areas, we can.
And in this particular case with Laken Riley, were you able to determine what type of asphyxia you saw?
I was not able to categorize it.
So how did you categorize it in your report then, or how did you characterize it?
I just referred to it as asphyxia and not otherwise specified.
So it could be manual strangulation, but you just don't have enough findings to say that.
Correct.
Could be compression.
Correct.
So you told us the global injuries. I want to start first with Laken's face and head, and then move down the rest of her body, if you could.
Okay.
So we're looking at states 303. Can you tell the court what we're looking at there?
303 is what we call our quote-unquote ID shot. So we take this for every case where we put the case number under the individual's face and take this photograph.
Do you see any injuries to Laken's face?
Yes.
What are those injuries? Please, can you describe them for us?
She has a combination of abrasions, which are scrapes, as well as contusions, which is just a fancy medical way of saying a bruise, so bleeding under the skin, as well as lacerations. Lacerations, as opposed to an abrasion just being a scrape of the skin, a laceration is a defect of the skin and the tissue immediately underlying it.
States 304, what are we looking at there?
This is another photograph of her face with a little bit of a closer view, as well as more exposure of the injuries to the left side of her head.
And can you see in states 304 her neck?
Yes.
And did you observe any injuries to her neck? And if you did, could you please describe them for us? Sure. States 319, do you recognize it? Do you recognize your unique case number? Is your name on it?
Yes, it has my name as well as the unique case number, the county, and the name of Laken Riley.
And are those the fingernail clippings that you took at autopsy of Laken Riley?
Yes, these are the ones taken at autopsy.
State move to admit 319. No objection.
319 submitted.
Did you perform a sexual assault kit on Laken Riley?
Yes.
Tell me what you did. What is that, and how did you do it in this case?
A sexual assault kit consists of collecting evidence samples. So we took swabs of the vagina as well as the anus. And then we also collected scalp hair.
And at your autopsy and in your examination of Laken Riley, did you observe any signs of a completed sexual assault?
I did not observe anything that would make me believe there was a sexual assault. She had no anogenital trauma. In addition, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention the sexual assault kit also includes a swab of the oral cavity.
So States Exhibit 324, do you recognize that?
Yes.
What is it?
This is the envelope containing the sexual assault kit.
And again, do you see your unique case number, your name, and Laken Riley's name on that?
Yes.
State would move to admit States 324. No objection.
324 is admitted.
Did you, at autopsy, or was there at autopsy a sample of Laken Riley's DNA obtained during that procedure, during that process?
Yes, we obtained 2 bloodstain cards.
Did you also, at autopsy, have samples of Laken Riley's hair collected?
Yes.
How, and what's that process like?
Some of the scalp hair will be removed from the scalp, and when it's removed, you make sure that there's, the root comes along with it. So a collection of scalp hair from different areas of the scalp is collected.
Was her clothing also collected?
Yes.
And the vegetation that you observed in her hair when she arrived at your facility, was that also collected?
Yes.
I'm gonna come up near you with the device. First, States 323, do you recognize it?
Yes.
What is it?
This is a sample of the vegetative debris, so leaves and twigs taken from her hair.
And again, do you see your unique case number and your name and Laken Riley's name?
Yes.
State will move to admit States 323. No objection.
323 is admitted.
Did Laken Riley have a hair tie with her hair or some hair in her hair?
Yes.
And was that collected as well?
Yes.
States Exhibit 326, can you tell us what that is?
This is a evidence bag containing the black hair tie.
And the state would move to admit States 326. No objection.
326 is admitted.
And I want to move to her clothing. Let's start first with her shoes. States 322. Do you recognize 322?
Yes.
What is it?
This is an evidence bag containing her athletic shoes.
State would move 6322, move to admit 6322.
No objection.
States 320, what is that?
This is an evidence bag containing her pants.
State would move to admit states 320.
No objection.
States 321, what is that?
This is an evidence bag containing her underwear.
State would move to admit states 321.
No objection.
States 325.
This is an evidence bag containing her socks.
State would move to admit states 325.
No objection.
States 327.
This is an evidence bag containing a piece of black fabric that appeared to be a bra strap.
And the state would move to admit states 327.
No objection.
Dr. DeMarco, did you form an opinion as to the cause of death of Laken Riley?
I did.
What is that opinion?
Her cause of death is the combined effects of blunt force head trauma and asphyxia.
What is her manner of death?
Homicide.
May I have 1 moment, Your Honor?
Yes.
I will pass the witness. May I just have a moment to put my photos away?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Is hemorrhaging considered a subset of a cause of death, or can it be its own cause of death? Blood loss. Is blood loss considered a subset of other causes of death, or can it be its own cause of death?
So, blood loss or exsanguination is not usually a word that we'll use for a cause of death. It's more so a mechanism of death. The cause would be the blunt force trauma that caused the hemorrhaging, if that makes sense.
And that was my next question. So in this case, the blunt force trauma, it's not just the trauma, it would be possibly also the bleeding that came from that.
I think they're pretty intrinsically linked, but yes.
When I look at your report, and I just want to make sure we're looking at the same document. Do you have a 6-page report in front of you?
Yes.
And the top says official report, and then it has the GBI sigil in it.
Yes.
When I look at your report, it has a section called Case Individuals. Did you fill that out?
I did not.
That is automatically populated with this case number?
Yeah, it's just, excuse me, it is automatically populated by our LIMS system, which is Laboratory Information Management System.
Do you know who decides how to categorize these 4 individuals?
I do not.
And just for the record, is it true that it lists the victim as Laken Riley,
Correct.
the subject as Jose Antonio Ibarra,
Correct.
elimination Argenis Ibarra,
Yes.
elimination Diego Jose Ibarra?
Yes.
Did you measure Laken Riley's fingernails before they were clipped?
But I examined.
Fingernails before they were clipped.
They were intact. They were not broken.
Is it true that there was blood on the inside of the fingernails?
I would have to refer to the photograph to see, but I know that there was soiling of the fingers, specifically blood. I would have to look at the photographs.
In other words, you can remember that there were blood on the fingers, you just can't remember if they were underneath the fingernails?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Is that yes?
Yes, sorry.
Very good. The scratches on her torso, you'd agree with me that they're in a variety of lengths?
Yes.
There's also a little bit of variety of the width of these scratches.
A small amount, yes.
And you were discussing with the state the possibility that they were brush abrasions. Can you explain what you mean by brush abrasions?
So when we say brush abrasions, we're just giving a characterization to their appearance. So they have an appearance where there was some sort of movement across the surface.
So for example, someone could get brush abrasions by dragging somebody across the surface.
That's possible.
And you can't eliminate the possibility that some of these scratches are brush abrasions.
I can't entirely exclude it, but I don't favor that they are.
Do you have an opinion as to whether these scratches could have been caused post-mortem?
I do not think that they were postmortem.
And why not?
These scratches showed something that we call a vital reaction. So when you see red discoloration in the area of the injury, that is an indication of bleeding, and you will not see bleeding into the tissues in a postmortem injury.
Does that differ depending on how close in time to the death that happens?
No.
So if somebody is deceased and then the next second there's a cut, wouldn't that also have bleeding associated with it because of the blood left in the body?
So the bleeding that goes into the tissues is a effect of the heart pumping. So the heart needs to be pumping to have the pressure to push that blood into the tissues at the injury site.
And so you're saying you didn't notice, not to put words around, just trying to repeat, you didn't notice signs of blood being pumped through those wounds on, or you did notice signs of blood being pumped through those wounds on scratches?
Yes.
Okay. Just one moment. Do you have an opinion as to what caused the scratches on her torso?
Some sort of blunt force trauma.
Is it possible they were caused by fingernails?
It's possible.
I don't have any questions.
Redirect.
Briefly. When asked about, again, the marks to her torso, you said, I don't favor that they are called brush abrasions.
Could you explain that to us, and what do you really mean about I don't favor that?
They don't have the stereotypical appearance of what I would call a brush abrasion.
And that's why when you say you don't favor, they are, what do you mean by the word favor?
I mean, based on my experience and the brush abrasions that I've seen, these have a slightly different appearance, but I cannot entirely exclude them being from a brush injury.
And you answered the defense counsel's question. It's possible it's fingernails. It's also possible that it's an object. It's possible that it's anything that could have caused blunt force trauma to her in this manner.
Correct.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
Anything else, Ms. Beth?
I don't think so, Your Honor.
All right. Can she be excused?
Yes, sir.
Any objection from the defense?
No objection.
Okay, excuse, Doctor. May I call your next witness?
The state calls Annie Kissler-Rowell.
Annie Rowell.
May I have one moment to notify the people that you
Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you will give today, no matter the state of Georgia versus Jose Ibarra, be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Please take a seat, state and spell your complete name.
My name is Ann Kissler-Rao, ANNEKISLER-RAO.
What do you do for a living?
I'm employed with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, Division of Forensic Sciences, also known as the State Crime Lab, and I'm employed as the technical leader of the Trace Evidence Section.
What is the trace evidence section?
Trace Evidence Section analyzes small, often microscopic pieces of evidence, such as hairs, fibers, glass, paints, plastics, and fractured materials.
How long have you worked in that capacity?
I have been employed with the GBI Crime Lab for over 18 years. I've been the technical leader for over a year now.
Over what?
1 year now.
Okay. And as the technical leader, do you have certain additional responsibilities?
Yes, in addition to examining pieces of evidence, I'm also responsible for training other individuals in our section and coordinating the proficiency testing in our section and overseeing the analytical manuals.
Are you a microanalyst?
Yes, so part of my job is to perform duties as a microanalyst.
What is a microanalyst?
A microanalyst is someone who analyzes small, often microscopic pieces of evidence, like the ones I mentioned, like hairs and fibers.
Would you describe to the court, please, your training and your education that qualifies you for your job?
I have a bachelor's degree in biology from the University of Pennsylvania. I have a master's degree in forensic science from John Jay College. With the GBI Crime Lab, I have completed extensive training programs in hairs, fibers, glass, plastics, paints, and fractured materials. I'm also certified by the American Board of Criminalistics in hair and fiber analysis.
In your career at the GBI, how many hair and fiber analyses have you conducted?
I think it's somewhere over 800 hair analysis and definitely over 150 fiber analysis.
Have you been qualified before as an expert in a courtroom in the field of microanalysis and hair comparisons?
Yes, I have.
Approximately how many times?
I've testified about 67 times within trace evidence, and I think hair was at least 35 of those.
And at this time, Your Honor, the state would move to tender Ms. Kissel-Rao as an expert in the fields of microanalysis and hair comparison.
Any objection? No, sir. The witness will be allowed to testify in those fields.
I'd like to turn your attention to your case number 2024-1005-107. Do you recognize that case number? Is that a case that you worked on for at the GBI?
Yes, I do recognize that case.
And who is the victim associated with that case number?
The victim is Laken Riley.
I'd like to ask you a few things about some of the tests that you did in this case. First of all, were you asked to examine some hairs that were removed from a jacket, which is your item 3 at the crime lab?
Yes, I was.
And what were you asked to do, and what did you observe about the hairs, and how did you?
I was asked to compare question hairs that were removed from the jacket to the known head hair of Laken Riley. So in order to do this, I took the previously collected tape lifts of the jacket. I then removed question hairs from those tape lifts and mounted them on microscope slides. I did this using a stereo microscope, which is a low-powered microscope. I then I classified the hairs using the stereo microscope and also a higher-powered microscope as to if they're animal or human, what body area they came from, possible ancestry characteristics. I evaluated the root ends of those hairs, and I determined if they were suitable for a microscopical comparison. So typically, we will compare head hairs and pubic hairs because they have more distinctive features. I then took the known head hair standard of Laken Riley and mounted that on separate microscope slides. So at this point, I compared the question hairs to the known head hair standard. And when I say known head hair standard, we like to have at least 25 hairs to encompass the entire range of features present on that person's head.
How many head hairs did you have from Laken Riley from the jacket item 3? I'm sorry, how many head hairs did you have that you determined were consistent with Laken Riley? Let's start with
Okay,
that.
so from the jacket, there were 29 hairs recovered from the jacket that I found to be microscopically consistent with the known head hair of Laken Riley, meaning they either originated from her or someone else with hair possessing the same distinct characteristics.
Were you able to make a determination of those 29 hairs? Did any of them have roots?
Yes, they did.
And how many of the 29 did?
So to explain, when we're looking at hair roots, there are basically 3 growth phases. We have anagen hair roots, which are the actively growing growth phase. Those would be the hairs that you need some sort of force to remove from your head. Catagen is the transitional phase, and then telogen is the resting phase, where those would be your naturally shed hairs. So when I looked at the roots, and you can tell the difference by the morphology of the root. So when I looked at the roots, 21 of those hair roots were in the anagen phase, the actively growing phase. The remainder were either broken, and I think there were 2 that were in the resting phase, the telogen phase.
And were you able to form any type of conclusion about those 21 hairs and how they may have been removed from her head?
So because they were in the anagen phase, some sort of force was needed to remove those hairs.
Some sort of what?
Force.
Force, okay. And when you explained to us your conclusion that you reached, and I may have misstated it, so I want to make sure you stated correctly. What was the conclusion that you reached on the 29 hairs from the jacket?
So the 29 hairs either originated from Laken Riley or someone with hair possessing the same distinct characteristics.
And how were you able to determine that?
So in order to perform my comparison, basically the basic structure of a hair that you're looking at is the main body of the hair is called the cortex. That's where you find the pigment granules that give the hair its color. Running down the center of a hair is a tube-like structure called the medulla, which may or may not be present. And then running along the outside of the hair is a thin layer of scales called the cuticle. So in order for me to determine whether or not the question hairs are consistent with the known, I examine them using the stereo microscope, the low-powered microscope, and then I take them to a comparison microscope. So a comparison microscope is basically 2 microscopes that are connected together by an optical bridge, where I can put the question hairs on one side and the known hairs on the other side and see them at the same time under the same field of view. So when I look at the hairs, I am examining features like the color of the hair, the pigment granules,
the size of the pigment granules, the distribution of these pigment granules, the density of them. I'm looking at the medulla. Is it continuous? Is it broken up? Is it not even there? Is it translucent? Is it opaque? I'm looking at features like the scales and any other microscopic features that might be present. And I will compare those in the question hair to that in the known hair standard as I go from root to tip throughout the hair to determine whether or not the question hair falls within the range of the known.
And you did that for all of your hair comparisons in this case, that process that you just described?
Yes, I did.
And is that process that you just described a generally accepted or widely accepted method of comparing hairs in your scientific community?
Yes, it is.
And has it been, this method been published in relevant scientific journals?
Yes, it has.
And is it reproducible and reliable?
It is.
When doing your comparisons that you just explained to us, and I'm going to move on to other objects, but in doing it, my question is globally for all the hair comparisons that you did in this case, did you follow the GBI's protocols and procedures in conducting the tests?
Yes, I did.
And does the GBI have specific protocols and procedures in how you do your microscopic hair analysis and comparison?
Yes, we do.
Are you familiar with those?
Yes,
And do you in fact train people on those?
I do.
And did you follow those in this case?
Yes, I did.
I want to move on to rocks. Were you asked to look at hairs that were removed from two items? And I'm going to use your GBI numbers again. So for your case number 2024-100510, I want to refer your attention to two item numbers, and I'm talking your GBI item numbers, which would be items 2 and 3. Are items 2 and 3 rocks?
Actually, I think those were our items 22 and 23.
Yes, sorry. 2 and 3 was the crime scene. Your item numbers 22 and 23 are those rocks from the crime scene.
Yes, they are.
And did you look at those hairs removed from those rocks from the crime scene?
I did.
And what were your results on that? Well, first of all, did you use the same process that you just described to us?
Yes, I did.
And what were your results?
I found off of one of the rocks there were 2 hairs, and off the other rock there were 27 hairs, all found to be microscopically consistent with the known head hair of Laken Riley, meaning they either originated from her or someone else with hair possessing the same distinct microscopic characteristics.
And finally, I want to ask you about a pair of underwear where you asked to examine Laken Riley's underwear that was removed at autopsy.
Yes, I was.
And what is your GBI item number for that item of evidence?
Our GDI item number is item 44B.
I am going to hand you what has already been admitted into evidence as State's Exhibit 321. Open it, I don't want to, yeah, go ahead. Yes. Do you recognize State's 321?
Yes, I do.
And do you see your unique GBI number associated with Laken Riley?
Yes, I do.
And do you see the item number for her underwear?
Yes.
Your GBI item number?
Yes, I do.
And do you see your initials too?
Yes.
Okay, and did you examine that underwear 321?
I did, yes.
And can you tell the court what you did to it?
So for the underwear, I was asked to determine if the damage was a cut or a tear. So I used the stereo microscope, which is the low-powered microscope, to look at the damage and evaluate the features of the damage to determine that.
Did you see, and I'm going to ask you to show it now, did you see damage to her underwear when you examined it?
Yes.
And how did you examine it?
Yes. So I looked visually and then also using that stereo microscope to examine.
And the damage that you see, can you show the court the damage that you see?
The damage is right here.
In the middle of the underwear. And you were asked to determine what about this damage?
I was asked to determine if it was cut or torn.
How did you go about determining whether it was cut or torn?
I looked at features of the damage. So some of the features that we might observe in something that is torn would be a curling under of the fabric. You might see the yarn ends might be frayed of differing lengths, lying in a different plane, whereas something that is cut would more likely be straight yarn ends that are less frayed. And then also you might see stretching. Also with a knit fabric like this one, sometimes you can see rows of loops that make up the knit fabric remain still intact with a torn fabric because they're being torn at the point of weakest structure. Whereas with a cut fabric, you might often see that those loops are cut straight through.
Did you perform your examination by using a microscope?
I did.
What were your conclusions?
I determined that this damage is consistent with having been torn.
May I have 1 moment, Your Honor?
Yes. comparison that you testified about. Well, first of all, I heard you say that that the methods you use are published in scientific journals?
So the methods that we use are recognized throughout the scientific community as acceptable methods. And there is a standard published that describes the methods.
But that wasn't what Ms. Ross asked you, if their methods were published in scientific journals, and you said...
Scientific journals have been published that have used the same methods.
Could you point me to one?
Sure. There's one journal by Houck and Boudoyle that was discussing the discrimination of microscopical hair comparisons versus the results of mitochondrial hair comparisons.
What year was that?
I don't actually, I don't recall the exact year. It was Journal of Forensic Sciences.
Are you aware of any public scientific publications outside of forensic sciences, like an academic science journal that has published a peer-reviewed article on hair comparison?
So most of the hair comparison articles are within forensic science journals that I am aware of.
And those are the scientists like yourself who testify in court.
Some of them might testify in court.
But I mean, that's what forensic science is, right? It's the use of the application of science to legal investigation in the courtroom.
Yes, and there are people who work at universities who also work within the forensic science team.
Okay. I read about one FBI study from 2002. Are you familiar with that one?
Could you explain?
Well, it was the one where they found that in 80 cases that there was an 11% error rate based on the comparison that the microscopic hair examiners had compared against when the mitochondrial DNA was examined.
So that's actually the article that I mentioned. So yes, they did find that about 90% of the hair comparisons were in fact verified by a mitochondrial DNA exam. Of the ones that were not verified, a lot of them were more lightly colored blonde hairs that had less features for comparison.
But it did conclude that 11% of the examiners were wrong in that test.
I would not say wrong, that's just showing the limitations of this particular examination. So they did show that about 90%, and they said about 11% were shown to did not actually support the microscopical comparison.
And so, but I'm not sure if I'm using this word right, the control there was the mitochondrial DNA testing.
They were just comparing basically the two examinations together to see what the results were from the mitochondrial DNA exams versus the microscopical.
You would agree that the mitochondrial DNA testing is going to be a lot more accurate than the hair comparison?
I would not say more accurate. So mitochondrial DNA also is not an absolute form of identification, and there is actually the potential for hair exams to distinguish individuals that mitochondrial DNA cannot.
And in a number of the hairs that you examined, the lab would have had the ability to go beyond the mitochondrial DNA testing to the full DNA profile testing.
So yes, there's sometimes potential for nuclear DNA testing.
And you even note that in your report that, hey, if you want to go further and either get other results that could confirm this test or eliminate Laken Riley as a potential donor of the hair, that DNA testing was available.
Yes, that's right. That's possible.
That's all. Thank you.
What color was Laken Riley's hair?
May I refer to my notes? So I have it described as a medium brown, and then a lot of her hairs, the longer hairs, got lighter towards the tip of the hair.
That's all I have, thank you.
Anything else, Mr. Johnson? No, sir. You should be excused.
Yes, sir.
Call your next witness.
The state calls Katrina Ostapovich.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony
You will get today in the matter of the state of Georgia versus Jose Ibarra
testify will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
If you could please take a seat, state and spell your first and last name.
My name is Katrina Ostapovich. That is Katrina. Last name Ostapovicz.
And if you could adjust that microphone to make sure, and maybe scoot up a little bit, just to make sure that when you're speaking into the mic, so everyone can hear you. Good afternoon, where do you work?
I work at the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, or GBI, Crime Lab.
What are your duties and responsibilities there?
I am a forensic serologist, so I test evidence that comes in to the forensic biology department for the presence of bodily fluids, semen, saliva, and blood.
How long have you worked there?
A little over 3 years.
Tell us about your duty or your education and your training that qualifies you for your job.
I have a master's in biomedical forensic science from Boston University. I also underwent approximately 6 months of training at the GBI, which included mock casework and written and oral exams.
And what, in general terms, I think you've already told us, but as a serologist, how do you look for the presence of blood, semen, and saliva?
I perform testing. The majority of it is what's called chemical color change tests, or essentially I add different chemicals to small sections of a sample or a stain item. And if there is a color change, it's considered a positive result. If there is no color change, it's considered a negative result.
How many items have you had the opportunity to test in your time at the GBI for the presence of blood, semen, and saliva?
I'm not sure, hundreds at this point.
And in doing your test at the GBI, are you familiar with your policies and procedures?
Yes, I am.
And do you all have policies and procedures about how you're supposed to perform your job?
Yes.
And did you follow those in conducting your test in this case?
Yes, I did.
Have you previously been qualified before as an expert in the field of forensic serology?
Yes, I have.
At this time, Your Honor, the state would tender Mr. Ostapovich as an expert in the field of forensic serology.
Objection. Witness will be allowed to testify in the area of forensic serology.
Ms. Ostapovich, I want to direct your attention to your unique case number 2024-1005107. Is that the case that is associated with Laken Riley?
Yes, it is.
And did you conduct some testing on items in her case to determine the presence, if there is blood, semen, or saliva present?
Yes, I did.
We're going to go item by item, but not necessarily in the order in which you tested it. So if you need to refer your notes or your report, please let me know.
Okay.
First of all, though, I want to talk to you about your item number 2 at the GBI. What is your item number 2 at the GBI?
Can I look at my report?
Sure.
My item number 2 at the GBI is a sealed package containing 3 black gloves.
And those 3 black gloves, did you test those 3 black gloves?
Yes.
Okay. And prior to conducting tests on those 3 black gloves, did you photograph them?
Yes, I did.
I'm gonna hand you what's been marked as States Exhibits 291, 292, and 293, and ask that you recognize, if you recognize those, we'll start there.
Yes, I do.
Do you recognize 291 and 293? What are they?
They are photographs that I took of some of the gloves that were in item.
Thank you. And do they fairly and accurately depict the gloves as you observed them, and on what day did you take these photos?
I took these photos on February 23rd, 2024, and yes, they show what I saw when I opened them.
So you would move to admit 291 through 293.
Judge, I'll let Ms. Cross just go ahead with the rest of them. I take a look at these. I'm not.
Those are the only photos. But I'll show her the actual item while we're looking at those. But we gotta wait for a ruling on the admission of the first.
Okay.
291, 292, 293 are admitted.
And may I publish, Your Honor, and could you put the LMO up?
Yes.
Starting first with States 291. First of all, where were you when these photographs were taken?
This was at my workbench in the serology lab.
So you're at the crime lab?
Yes.
Did you observe any damage to these gloves?
Yes, I did.
What damage did you observe, and can you see it in the photograph 291? And if you can, if you could use a pointer, there should be a pointer next to you. Show us with a pointer. Go ahead.
Can I stand?
Yes, you may, so long as you keep your voice up.
Okay.
And if you could, just make sure you keep your voice up so Madam Court Reporter can hear you, but she's turning, I think, so she can hear you. Okay.
Okay. So there was quite a bit of damage on these gloves. The most notable was there a large tear or rub mark, I suppose, right here in between the thumb and the forefinger.
And was there holes in the thumb area of the gloves?
Yes.
Can you show those to us?
So yeah, you can see it right around here.
Okay, and you're circling the thumb area of the glove on 291 for the record.
Yes.
Was there more than one hole in these gloves?
As far as I recall, yes.
States 292. What are we looking at there?
So yes, this here you can see there's a hole here, which is down.
I hate to stop you, but I can tell Madam Court Reporter's having a hard time hearing you, so keep your voice up. Okay, you're good. All right, there's a hole at the bottom. You were pointing to the bottom of 292.
Yes, so there's a hole around like the wrist area in here, and then there's a hole up in the finger area up here as well.
States 293. What are we looking at there?
So this is, again, glove. And then there is a hole up here, on the finger up here, and one up in this finger up here, and then there's some tearing down here as well.
On the thumb area?
Yeah, that thumb area.
Thank you. You can resume your seat. And these were admitted, we were gonna show them. Thank you. So in front of you, I have a bag. If you could just look inside that bag, see, do you see your initials on that bag?
I do see my initials, yes.
And inside that bag, what item number is that for you, Juliana?
This bag?
Yes.
The bag is item number 2.
All right, and so in that bag, would that be the gloves that we saw in the photographs?
Yes.
Okay. Can you tell us what you did to the gloves that we saw in the photographs?
So the gloves in the photographs, I performed a blood examination. This involves essentially 2 chemical color change tests that are run simultaneously. One of them, a positive result, would be a bluish-greenish color change, and the other would be a pinkish color change. Both of those would need to be positive, like show a positive color change, in order to be considered presumptively positive for blood and then sent on for DNA.
What were your results of those tests?
For each of the gloves, my results were that I got both showed a positive color change, so both were presumptively positive for blood.
And did those go on to DNA?
Yes, they did.
I want to ask you about a jacket, which is your item number 3. Did you conduct testing on item number 3?
Yes, I did.
What did you do to item number 3?
For item number 3, I also performed a chemical color change test, or the same chemical color change test. It was a blood examination on a visible stain on the jacket.
And when you say a visible stain, what did you see?
I saw a reddish-brown stain on the jacket, which is what I tested.
What kind of test did you do on that reddish-brown stain?
It was a blood exam, so it was the same 2 chemical color change tests as I performed on the gloves.
What were your results?
It was both tests showed positive color changes, so they were presumptively positive for blood.
And the blood on the jacket, did you do anything to the jacket once you realized there was blood on the jacket, or not once you realized, but once you tested it and your tests were positive?
Yes, I cut out the stained area and packaged it in its own package for it to be sent on for DNA.
So I'm going to approach with two items. The first is what has been marked States Exhibit 147, but is your evidence number 3. So I want you to look at that, see if you recognize your initials on that, you recognize that item.
Yes, I do.
And is that the jacket that you conducted the test on that you just told us about?
Yes, it is.
And I want to first go with the cutting then. And may I publish, it's already been admitted, may I publish 147, Your Honor?
Yes.
Can you show us on 147 where you did your cutting?
Yes, so I took a cutting from right here, which is the shoulder area.
So that would be the left shoulder area of the jacket?
Yes.
Where we see the white?
Yes.
Okay, that's your cutting.
Yes, it is.
States Exhibit 176, what's that?
This is the envelope that I placed the cutting into, and that was then sent on for DNA.
And do you see your initials on that 176?
Yes, I do.
And your unique case number?
Yes, I do.
State me to admit States 176.
Any objection?
Objection.
176.
So this might sound like a silly question, but when you tested the jacket for blood and your results were positive, does that mean there's blood on this jacket?
It means that there is likely blood on this jacket. My tests are presumptive, so I can't say with absolute certainty that it's blood.
And then it goes from where to, from you?
Then it gets sent on for DNA testing.
And what did you observe about the stain that caused you to test it?
So blood has a distinctive reddish-brown staining. So when performing blood exams on large items like pieces of clothing, I look for reddish-brown stained areas, and those are the ones that I test.
And did you see reddish-brown stains on the jacket?
Yes, I did.
I want to ask you about a part of a tree. Did you test part of a tree?
Yes, I did.
What did you do to that part of the tree, and what is that item number for the GBI?
The item number for the GBI is item number 24, I believe. And I performed the 2 chemical color change tests that I had mentioned before for both the gloves and the jackets. I performed a blood exam.
What were your results?
Both tests gave positive color change results, so presumptively positive for blood.
And was that sent on to DNA?
Yes, it was.
2 rocks. What are the item numbers? Did you test 2 rocks?
Yes, I did.
What are your item numbers of those 2 rocks for the GBI?
For the GBI, the item numbers are number 22 and 23.
What did you do to those 2 rocks?
I performed blood exams, so those same 2 chemical color change tests.
And what were your results? And did you do that for both rocks, for the record?
Yes, I did for both rocks.
Okay. What was your results for both of those rocks?
For both rocks, both tests gave positive color change results, so they were presumptively positive for blood.
And where did they go from there?
They were then sent on for DNA.
Finally, I want to ask you about a black Adidas hat. Did you test a black Adidas hat for the presence of blood?
Yes, I did.
What is that item number for you at the GBI?
That would be item number 39.
And I want to hand you what's been marked for identification purposes, the State's Exhibit 151. Ask that you, first of all, do you recognize or see on State 151 your unique GBI case number?
Yes, I did.
And do you see the item number that you just told me was the hat?
Yes, I do.
And can you look inside of that item number quickly? It's open already. You don't have to do it quickly, but I just want you to look inside.
Yes.
And what do you see inside of State's, what's my number inside? 151.
I see a black Adidas hat.
Okay, and is this the black Adidas hat that you did presumptive blood testing on?
Yes, it is.
State Route Exhibit 151, if I've not done so already.
It's in.
All right, thank you.
I'll look.
151. I know. So, 151 is then something published with the court's permission. It's 150, which is. Right, that's already, that was a stipulation. 150 was admitted this morning, 150 was admitted this morning by stipulation, which is a sticker off. So that 151, and now that we have all that settled, is in, I'm gonna publish 150. Can you tell the court, I'm gonna hand you 151 now, it's out of the bag. Where on that item did you test for the presence of blood?
So I tested for the presence of blood on each of these circled marks. So one on the brim here, and then I believe 7, I believe, on the hat itself, and then 1 on the bottom of the brim.
And what were your results?
So my results were that for this hat, one of these had a positive result, or presumptively positive result, which means that again the 2 chemical color change tests gave positive color changes.
And which one was it?
I believe it was this one down here, 9 on the bottom of the brim.
On the brim of the hat on the inside though?
On the inside, yes.
Where you circled it, and is that your circling?
Yes, that's my circle.
That's what you do when you're processing items?
Yes, it is.
And so when that tested positive for blood, what did you do with this?
It was then sent on, or I swabbed it, packaged the swabs, and then sent the swabs on for DNA.
Just like you had done for all the other items that had tested positive.
Yes.
Did you have the opportunity to test a white styrofoam cup and its top in a straw, and you have to tell me which of these items, for the presence of amylase?
I guess I did.
Okay, what is amylase, first of all?
Amylase is a component of saliva. It is the component that helps to digest carbohydrates.
Handing you what's already been admitted as State's Exhibit 141. You can look inside of it if you need to. You recognize 141.
Yes, I did.
Now, what is your GBI crime lab number or item number associated with that?
Item 64.
And what did you do to item 64?
So I tested the straw and I tested the rim of the cup for the presence of amylase or the presence of saliva. That's a different chemical color change exam, but it works much the same way. For this one, a positive color change would be a blue color. And I tested, as I said, the rim of the cup and the straw separately.
And did you put your initials on them?
I put my initials on the bag. I did not put my initials on myself. That's not mine.
So the rim of the cup, which is in my hand?
Yes.
And in the straw, which is also in my right hand?
Yes.
That's my right hand. What were your results of your amylase test for the cup and straw?
So the cup was a negative result or no color change, and the straw had a positive chemical color change or a color change to blue, which means it's presumptively positive for amylase, saliva, and was then sent on for DNA.
Did you examine all of the clothing of Laken Riley for the presence of semen or seminal fluid?
Yes, I did.
How did you do that?
So at first, the first step is taking each article of clothing to the ALS or the alternate light source. This functions much like a black light, where stains that might not be visible to the human eye glow underneath the black light, underneath the ALS. And then for each of those stains that I saw, I then performed another chemical color change test for the presence of a component of seminal fluid. For this one, the positive color change would have been to a pinkish purple color.
What were your results of all of your tests for her clothing?
For all of the clothing, I found stains to test, but each stain was negative or no color change, except for one stain on the underwear, which had a weak positive result.
And so what were you able to do with that, if anything?
So with that weak positive result, what I then did was I moved it forward into the testing. I performed a microscopic exam, or essentially I took a small cutting of it and looked for the presence of sperm cells, and that was negative. So I then performed another test for the presence of seminal fluid. This one functions somewhat like a pregnancy exam, where during the testing, if you get 2 lines, it's positive, and 1 line is negative. For this, I got 1 line, so it was negative.
So in the end, does that mean there was no seminal fluid or semen present?
Yes, that means.
On any of her clothing?
On any of the clothing.
May I have 1 moment, Your Honor? I'll pass the instrument.
Good afternoon, Ms. Ostapovich.
Good afternoon. Yes.
So I just, we've had a couple of the GBI people here, and I just kind of want to go through how the system works. When the GBI receives a piece of evidence, it sends them to people to be kind of presumptively tested. There's different levels of testing that go on. Is that right?
So the presumptive testing would be like a screening procedure, essentially.
A screening procedure, and that's kind of what you're doing in this case. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Obviously, there's limited resources. We can't test everything for everything.
Yes.
Fair to say?
Yes.
Okay. And so it's your job to kind of figure out what needs to go on to the next person.
Yes, through my testing.
Okay. And so we call them presumptive tests because they're not definitive, but they're worth looking at further.
Yes.
Okay. And so when you looked at the gloves in this case, did you notice whether or not they were whether you could only wear them on one hand or the other? I'm going to say dexterous, but it's ambidextrous is the word that I'm looking for. I'm sure there's a better word for it.
No, I did not. As I said, they were quite torn up. There was a lot of holes in them, and as with a lot of gloves, including the ones I'm wearing right now, they can be put on either hand.
Okay. And so there's no part of your examination that would tell you which hand any of these gloves were being worn on?
No.
Okay. And you mentioned some holes that were, you said the biggest one, it sounded like was between the thumb and the index finger. Is that right?
As far as I can recall, yes.
Okay. And there were also some holes on one of the thumbs. Is that right?
I believe, yeah, there was some tearing on one of the thumbs and then on some of the other fingers as well.
Okay, and some of the other fingers. Did you measure those at all?
No, I did not.
Okay. Did you try to reconstruct where on the thumb those would be? I mean, were there pieces of plastic missing, for instance?
No, I didn't do that. That's not part of of the testing that I performed, though.
Okay. And you don't know how the gloves were ripped, obviously?
No, I did not.
Okay. And I noticed that you're wearing gloves now. Is that to prevent DNA transfer, to prevent biological contamination?
At this point, it is, yes, to prevent biological contamination from me to anything or from anything to me.
Okay. And if you had holes in those gloves, obviously you would be worried about biological contamination, right?
Yes, I would.
Okay. On the cap that we looked at, do you know who that was taken off of?
No, I
Do
do
you know how
not.
it was collected?
No, I do not.
And you first look at these things visually, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, and so were you circling places that you had visually seen what you thought might be blood?
On the hat?
Yep.
On the hat. So for that, I was circling ones that I visually saw blood, but then I took that one under the ALS as well, because there is a setting that can be used to look for blood, as blood does not fluoresce. So blood looks very dark under ALS.
Okay, and the area that you noted that was positive for blood was area number 9, is that right?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Well, when you say you believe so, how would you know? I mean, it's not in your report as to which one of these circles was presumptive for blood, was it?
No, but the way that blood testing works is that I perform test after test after test for each stain, and I continue on until there are no more stains left or until I find something that is positive. So the final circle there would be the one that was positive, and the one that I had circled that was under the broom there was labeled as number 9, and that was the highest number.
Okay. And then how did you know, we saw in the jacket that you cut out a piece of that. Was there any more processing in the hat that was done?
Well, the hat, because I took the presumptive positive result that I got was on the brim, which would not be feasible to cut. That I swabbed that and then sent the swabs on for DNA.
Okay. All right. You also performed the semen analysis, which is the last thing that you talked with Ms. Ross about. I just want to be clear about something. There were some presumptive tests. And again, we have layering of things to make sure we're right on this. There were some presumptively positive tests, but ultimately there was no semen or seminal fluid found on anything, any of the clothes that you were sent as part of coming off of Laken Riley.
Yes, so there was one stain that had one positive result, but overall, yes, there was no semen or seminal fluid on any of the clothing.
Okay. Had there been anything that was positive from your end of however many layers you have to go through, you would have sent that on for further testing, correct?
Yes, I would have.
Okay, and that would have been sent to be DNA tested, correct?
Yes, it would have.
Okay, that's all the question I have.
We correct?
No, sir.
Should be excused.
Yes, sir. May we approach quickly while she's...
Yes. You're excused.
Raise your right hand, please. Do you swear from the testimony you will give today in the matter of the state of Georgia versus Jose Ibarra will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please take a seat, state and spell your first and last name.
Ashley Hinkle, Ashley, Hinkle.
Where are you employed?
I'm employed at the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, the Division of Forensic Sciences, in the Forensic Biology section in Decatur, Georgia.
How long have you been working there?
Approximately 18 years.
What is your title and your duties and responsibilities?
I'm a crime lab scientist. My duties and responsibilities include analyzing evidence for the presence of bodily fluids. If those are present, I attempt to obtain a DNA profile and compare that profile to reference sample profiles that are collected directly from an individual. I'm also trained in a software program to analyze complex mixtures called True Allele.
What is your education and your training that qualifies you for your job?
I have a Bachelor's of Science in Biology from East Carolina University and a Master's of Science in Forensic Science from Marshall University. I have extensive in-house training at the Georgia Bureau of Investigation and the National Forensic Science Technology Center. I have continuing education and proficiency testing on a yearly basis. I also have a approximately 1 year training initially in the True Allele software.
And that is initially, when were you first trained on the True Allele software?
2017.
How long was that training and what did it consist of?
It was approximately a year. It consisted of, we had a presentation from Dr. Perlin, who is the creator of the True Allele software. We read literature on True Allele and videos that were available. We had mock samples of known mixtures with known contributors, and we performed the testing from start to finish on those mock samples.
And so, just to explain a little bit about that process, would that be like you taking my DNA and your DNA, mixing it together so you know it's mine and you know it's yours, and you know at what levels we both contributed, you would then test it in True Allele and see if it was accurate?
Yes, it's employee profiles mostly, and we can't practice on casework samples, so we have to use these type of samples for training.
So for training, y'all practice on yourselves, basically?
Yes.
Okay. And you did that for the True Allele software in this case as well, and you receive ongoing training?
Yes.
How many items of evidence have you had the opportunity to process for DNA in your career at the GBI?
In the thousands.
How many times have you testified as an expert in a court of law in the field of forensic serology, forensic DNA, and True Allele?
Approximately 300 times.
Okay. At this time, Your Honor, the state would tender Ms. Hinkle as an expert in the fields of forensic biology, forensic DNA, and True Allele.
I forgive all the motions that were involved in this, Judge. I reiterate that we don't have an expert in this case.
I will allow the witness to testify in the other area of forensic biology, DNA profile comparison, True Allele software process.
I want to direct your attention to your case number 2024-1005107. Is that the case number associated with Laken Riley for the GBI?
Yes, it is.
And did you conduct DNA testing in this case?
Yes, I did.
And I want to go item by item to talk about which items you tested, what type of DNA testing you did, your methodologies that you used, and your results. But if you could first globally tell us what types of DNA testing are involved in this particular case with this case number?
The DNA testing consists of what we call traditional DNA testing, where we look at 21 locations along the DNA strand that we use to compare between individuals. Everyone should have a unique profile except for identical siblings. The next type of testing was YSTRs, where we look at 27 locations along the Y chromosome. This allows us to tell if a male individual is present or not present in a DNA mixture where there is too much female DNA that it overshadows the male profile. Also, True Allele testing was used.
And in all the types of DNA testing, traditional, YSTR, and True Allele, did you follow the GBI's policies and procedures as regards to each of those different types of DNA testing?
Yes, I did.
And of the methods that you used for traditional DNA, YSTR DNA, and True Allele DNA, are all of those methods and the methodology that you use generally or widely accepted in your scientific community?
Yes.
Have they been published, the methodology, in relevant scientific journals?
Yes.
Has it been tested, and are those methodologies reliable and reproducible?
Yes, they are.
And were your results in this case, all of your results, peer-reviewed by another scientist?
Yes, they were.
And is that part of the GBI protocols and procedures?
Yes, it is.
And was it followed in this case?
Yes, it was.
I want to start with you let's just go item by item. I want to start the first item, if you don't mind. How about a jacket, item 3 from the crime lab? Did you test, and I've got item 3 here, so one more. Did you test a blue jacket and a cutting from the blue jacket for DNA?
Yes, I tested a cutting from a blue jacket as well as contact swabbings from the blue jacket.
What is contact swabbing?
Contact swabbings are an attempt to attain a profile from someone generally wearing an item of clothing. It doesn't work too well for just touching an item of clothing, but it's someone who has physical contact with their skin and clothing as compared to just testing for bodily fluids.
And I want to ask you that question. So you will do contact swabbing for someone if you believe they wore the item of clothing you just told us. Why doesn't contact swabbing work well for people just touching an item of clothing?
There is a minimum amount of DNA that needs to be present for the testing to be reliable and reproducible. So just touching generally doesn't leave enough skin cells behind to obtain a profile.
I'm going to hand you what's been already admitted as State's Exhibit 147, and there's also a cutting from State's 147. Do you recognize these two items? And the cutting for the record is 176, and I'll give you some gloves if you need them.
No.
Do you recognize those two items?
I recognize 176, yes, and I recognize that it comes from the jacket, although I did not handle the jacket myself.
Because that was done by Katrina before you?
Yes.
Okay, there you go, if you need those. And so can you tell us for the jacket, the cuttings from the jacket, which is 150 again? It's right in front of you.
176.
176. What did you do to 176? What type of DNA testing did you do on the jacket, and what were your results? And if we could start first with the traditional DNA with the cutting.
Traditional DNA testing was where we look at the 21 locations along the DNA strand. Do you want me to go through the process or just?
Sure, go ahead just for one. I don't want you to go through the process for every single item, but for the first one, go ahead.
The first step is to extract the DNA from the material. This is used by taking a small cutting, placing it in a tube with chemicals that help separate the DNA from the other biological material. A robot is used in this step as well. The next step is to quantitate the amount of DNA to see if there is human DNA present. We then make copies along the DNA strand of 21 locations we use to compare between individuals. These locations are different in size, and it's these different in sizes that help distinguish individuals. These fragments of DNA are separated on an instrument called a genetic analyzer, and it is the software from this genetic analyzer that we use. No, it is the data from the genetic analyzer that we use with the software program to type a profile.
When you conducted testing from the cutting of the jacket, that would have been traditional DNA?
Yes.
What were your results?
There was a partial major profile obtained from the cutting from the jacket, and that matched the profile of Laken Riley. There was also a partial minor profile obtained from the cutting from the blue jacket, and that matched the profile of Jose Antonio Ibarra. There are two people contributing to this DNA profile.
Now, since this is a mixture of two people, why didn't this go to true allele? Why were you able to do traditional DNA testing on this jacket cutting?
We are able to use other methods to separate mixtures into individual contributor genotypes, which is necessary in order for us to say whether a reference sample matches or not. Sometimes we can't separate mixtures into individual contributor genotypes, so that is when we use the software program.
So do you have a threshold at the GBI in which you send items to true allele versus dealing with them in traditional DNA?
Correct.
Okay. And so the cutting from the jacket, did it fall below the threshold where you had to send it to true allele, or was it above the threshold so you could keep traditional DNA?
It was above that threshold, yes.
Right. And so did you assign a frequency for the partial profile of Jose Antonio Ibarra for the jacket?
Yes, the partial minor profile was 1 in 9 billion individuals.
And this mixture of Laken Riley and Jose Ibarra on the jacket cutting is just the two of them?
Yes.
And prior to, I guess I should ask you this, did you obtain or did you have at the laboratory known DNA samples of Laken Riley?
Yes.
Known DNA sample of Jose Ibarra?
Yes.
Known DNA sample of Diego Ibarra?
Yes.
And known DNA sample of Argenis Ibarra?
Yes.
The jacket, does that complete the traditional DNA results on the jacket cutting?
There was a probability for the match to Laken Riley.
If you could give us that too.
1 in 10 quintillion individuals.
Okay. What about the contact swabs on the jacket? What were your results for that? Were you able to do traditional DNA or did you have to go to true allele?
Those were a complex mixture that had to go to true allele.
And what were your results? And tell us, for your first true allele results, we're not going to repeat it for every item. How did you move on to the next step for the contact swabs for the blue jacket and the true allele? What was that process? What did you do?
The TrueAllele process consists of using the electronic files that are generated by the genetic analyzer, as well as controls that we use in the testing. They are uploaded into a software program. I determine the number of contributors I believe is in a mixture, and then the software performs calculations to assign probabilities for genetic combinations at each of these 21 locations along the DNA strand for each contributor. And at the end, those possible genotypes are compared to a reference sample, and a likelihood ratio is given in the form of a match statistic.
What in general is a likelihood ratio?
Likelihood ratio is a ratio of probabilities. The probabilities of seeing the mixture with one person's reference sample over the population database.
The TrueAllele results from the contact swabbings from the jacket, what were they?
The contact swabbings from the jacket contain a mixture of at least 3 individuals. A match was identified between the major evidence genotype from the contact swabbings from the blue jacket and Jose Antonio Ibarra. A match between the contact swabbings from the jacket and Jose Ibarra is approximately 100 trillion times more probable than a coincidental match to an unrelated person in the population.
How many zeros are in 100 trillion?
Billion is 9, trillion is 12, and then it's 100, so it's 14.
What was the results for the other person in the mixture?
Match was identified between a major a second major evidence genotype and Laken Riley. That match is approximately 8 quadrillion times more probable than a coincidental match to an unrelated person in the population.
And you said there were at least, you said how many people in the mixture?
At least 3.
Were you able to make a conclusion regarding other individuals that might be present in the jacket? And I guess specifically, did you compare the known DNA of Argenis Ibarra to see if he was present in that mixture?
Yes, I did, because our comparisons are for unrelated individuals. I went ahead and did the comparison to the 2 brothers.
Okay, and what were your results first for Argenis Ibarra? Was he present in that mixture?
No, he was not present in the major contributors. The match is approximately 60 quadrillion times less probable than a coincidental match to an unrelated person in the population.
And so does that mean he was excluded?
Yes.
What about Diego Ibarra? Did you look to see if he was in that mixture?
For Diego Ibarra and the profile from the contact swabbings from the blue jacket, he was approximately 10 million times less probable than a coincidental match to an unrelated person in the population. For this match likelihood ratio, there is a 5.36% chance of a false exclusion, and that is based on our validation data.
Was Diego excluded?
Yes, he was.
Were your TrueAllele results for the jacket concordant or consistent with your traditional DNA results for the jacket?
They were different samples, but yes.
The same 2 people?
Correct.
I had a very awkwardly worded question, thank you. It was the same 2 people, both traditional and TrueAllele?
Yes.
Moving on then to gloves, black gloves. Can you tell me, did you have the opportunity to test some black gloves and do DNA testing on those, and what item number would that be for you for the GBI?
I tested swabbings as well as contact swabbings from 3 black gloves. The black gloves are item 2A, 2B, and 2C. The swabbings and contact swabbings were item 6 through item 11.
What were your results?
Each one?
Yes, please. Sorry. You can start with 2A.
2A. The contact swabbings from the black glove contains the DNA profile of at least 2 individuals. The partial major profile matched Laken Riley. The frequency of the partial major profile from the contact swabbings from the black glove, 2A, item 7, is approximately 1 in 10 octillion individuals in the population. And due to limited data, I could not make any conclusions about the minor contributor, so that was, the data was sent to TrueAllele testing.
Okay. And what were the TrueAllele results?
For the, 2A, item 7, at least 2 individuals Again, it matched Laken Riley. This time it was 10 octillion times more probable than a coincidental match to an unrelated person in the population. And due to limited data, we still cannot make any conclusions about the minor contributor. When a contributor is less than 4% of the overall mixture, we don't make any conclusions based on our validation.
So you're not able to tell who else is there.
Correct.
Next item, which would be glove 2B. Same question, same format.
The next one to be item 8. Again, on this one there was a DNA profile of one individual. That profile matched Laken Riley, and the probability was 1 in 500 octillion individuals.
So on one of the gloves, which was 2B, it's just Laken Riley.
Correct.
2C.
2C. Or 2B item 9.
Yes. The third glove.
Thought we were still on 2B.
I thought we finished 2B. It was just Laken Riley?
2B item 9 was at least one individual, and it matched Laken Riley with 1 in 500 octillion individuals, but there was one additional genetic allele marker. But based on our policy, we couldn't make any conclusions about this one marker.
So would that be inconclusive as well?
For the minor contributor, yes.
Okay. All right. And 2C.
2C item 11 is at least 2 individuals. The major contributor to this profile from the contact swabbings 2C from the gloves is Laken Riley, approximately 1 in 500 octillion individuals.
And were you able to make any kind of conclusions about anyone else in that one?
Again, due to limited data, no conclusions could be made about the minor contributors, so it also went to true allele testing.
And what were your true allele results?
2C item 11, again, a mixture of 2 individuals, at least 2 individuals. The major contributor was Laken Riley, 10 octillion times more probable than a coincidental match to an unrelated person in the population. And again, due to limited data, being below 5% mixture ratio, mixture contribution, no conclusions could be made about the minor contributor.
Did you test the fingernails of Laken Riley?
Yes.
And how did you do that?
The fingernails were tested for traditional DNA as well as for YSTRs and true allele.
What were Laken Riley's fingernails, her item number and your unique item number for her case number?
Fingernail clippings from the right hand, item 18A, the swabbings was item 42. The swabbings from the left hand fingernails were item 18B. The swabbings were item 43.
Okay. So did you look at both the left hand and the right hand?
Yes.
Tell us your process and tell us your results, starting first with her right hand.
The right hand, the extraction, amplification, quantitation amplification steps I previously detailed were used. And amplification was performed with the traditional DNA method, and because of the complexity of the mixture, I could not make any conclusions. We went ahead and did YSTR testing as well on the fingernail clippings.
And did you do YSTR testing before you did true allele?
They were kind of at the same time.
Okay. So why don't we talk about YSTR first on the right hand, and then we'll move to the true allele for the right hand, and then we'll repeat the questions for the left.
For the right hand, there was the YSTR haplotype was one individual, one male individual, Jose Antonio Ibarra, and Argenis Ibarra cannot be excluded from the YSTR haplotype from the right-hand swabbings and the left-hand swabbings. Under the assumption no mutation has occurred, paternal male relatives also cannot be excluded.
So paternal brothers share the same YSTR haplotype, is that the word?
They should, unless there's a mutation.
Okay. And did you actually see a mutation in this particular case?
Yes, there was a mutation in Diego Ibarra's YSTR profile.
And so because of that genetic mutation, were you able to exclude Diego Ibarra as the donor of the male profile underneath Laken Riley's right hand?
Yes.
And so you could not, under YSTR, exclude Argenis Ibarra, you told us.
Correct.
And you could not exclude Jose Antonio Ibarra.
Correct.
Did the right fingernails go on the Trujillo?
Yes, I did.
And what were your results in Trujillo?
Can I state the probability for the YSTR?
You may, yes, sorry.
The YSTR profile has been observed in 29,207 total individuals in the national database, so it is expected to occur approximately in 1 in 9,750 male individuals.
All right. And moving on to Trujillo.
For Trujillo, the wet dry swabbings from the fingernail clippings from the right hand, 18A item 42, was a mixture of at least 2 individuals. We assume that the profile of Laken Riley was present when we did the calculations, so there will be no match statistic for her because it's an intimate sample. The DNA match between the wet dry swabbings from the fingernail clippings from the right hand and the match was to Jose Antonio Ibarra. The match is 10 billion times more probable than a coincidental match to an unrelated person in the population.
Was Diego Ibarra able to be excluded by Trujillo?
Diego's Ibarra's match was approximately 1 billion times less probable than a coincidental match to an unrelated person in the population, with a 5.36% chance of a false exclusion.
Does that mean he was excluded?
Yes.
What about Argenis Ibarra?
Argenis Ibarra, his match was 200 trillion times less probable than a coincidental match to an unrelated person in the population. Again, the 5.36% chance of a false exclusion.
And does that mean Argenis Ibarra was excluded?
Yes.
So then moving on to the left hand, and does that complete the results from the right hand?
Yes, it does.
Okay. So that would be, in the right hand, the Trujillo results would be Laken Riley and Jose Ibarra.
Correct.
Left hand.
Left hand contained a mixture of DNA from at least 2 individuals. Again, the reference of Laken Riley was assumed in the calculations.
And why are you permitted to do that?
Because the DNA is collected directly from her person, so we would expect her DNA to be there, so we can make an assumption.
All right, thank you.
Due to limited data, we could not make any conclusions about the foreign evidence genotype from the swabbings from the left hand. So again, that fell under the 4%.
Okay. Moving on then, did that complete both, that completed the fingernails, right and left?
Yes.
The straw, did you test a straw for the presence of DNA?
Yes, I did.
And what was that number from the front of the straw?
The straw was 64B, and the swabbings from the straw was item 66.
What did you do to the straw, and what were your results of the swabbings from the straw?
The serologist prepared swabbings from the swab that was used to test for her screening, and I used those same swabbings to obtain a DNA profile.
And the serologist in this case, would that be Katrina Osipovich?
Yes.
And so what did you do once you, what were your results of the straw then?
The results from the straw was, for the traditional DNA testing, I could not make any conclusions because it was about a 50-50 mixture, so I could not separate the profile into individual contributors.
So then what did you do?
I did Trujillo.
And what were your results?
The swabbings of the straw contained a mixture of DNA from at least 2 individuals. There was a match from the swabbings of the straw to Jose Ibarra. This is approximately 50 quadrillion times more probable than a coincidental match to an unrelated person in the population.
And what about the other DNA profiles there in the straw?
The other profiles, Argenis Ibarra was excluded from the data from the swabbings, 10 sextillion times less probable than a coincidental match. Diego Ibarra was also excluded, 10 quadrillion times less probable than a coincidental match.
And what about Laken Riley?
She was also excluded, 200 million times less probable than a coincidental match to an unrelated person.
And were you able to, other than identifying a match to the likelihood ratio of Jose Ibarra to approximately 50 quadrillion times more probable than a coincidental match to an unrelated person in the population, were you able to draw any other conclusions about the profile in this draw?
The profile from the straw, I know it shouldn't be a paternally related male individual because the kit we use contains one YSTR location that we test for, and this one YSTR location was different from both of the brothers and from Jose Ibarra.
Okay.
And it was a male individual.
All right. Did you test a swabbings from an Adidas black hat?
Yes.
What is the hat number for your laboratory, and what did you do?
For the hat, the number is, item 39 is the black ball cap, and the swabbings are item, sorry, item 56.
What did you do to the swabbings, and what were your results?
The traditional DNA testing was performed first, and because of the complexity of the mixture, I could not make any conclusions.
And then what happened to the data from that testing?
The Trilil was used on the swabbings from the hat. The black ball cap contained the profile of at least 3 individuals. There was a match from the data from the swabbings from the black ball cap and Laken Riley. This match is approximately 1 octillion times more probable than a coincidental match to an unrelated person in the population. Due to the complexity of the mixture, no conclusive determination could be made as to the minor contributor.
So you can't tell us who the minor contributors are on the hat?
Correct.
But Laken Riley was present on the hat for True Allele?
Yes.
Did you test rocks, which would be your items 22 and 23 at the crime lab?
Yes, rocks were tested.
Tell us about that.
There was swabbing from a rock, item 22, and contact swabbings from a rock, item 22, swabbings 58 and 59. And there was also another rock, item 23. Those swabbings were item 60, and those contained the DNA profile of 1 individual, and that profile matched the reference of Laken Riley. The frequency of the profile is approximately 1 in 500 octillion individuals in the population.
Okay. What about the other rocks? So only Laken Riley on that item?
Yes, only Laken Riley in the rock swabs.
Both rocks?
Both rocks.
All right. What about a tree? Did you test swabbings from a tree?
Yes.
And what were your results?
The tree, the cutting from the tree, was the profile of 1 individual. That again matched the profile of Laken Riley. Approximately 1 in 500 octillion individuals.
And only Laken Riley on the tree?
Correct.
I want to go back to the fingernails. And you told us on the right fingernails, it was, for True Allele results, Laken Riley and Jose Ibarra, correct?
Yes.
And are there any other persons present there?
No.
How is it that a person, or under what situations would you expect to find a person's DNA underneath another person's fingernails?
Usually it either has to have some sort of scratching or contact with the inside of the nail. These were shorter nails, so it wasn't like they were long nails that you can just accidentally have contact with. Also, you could have someone's DNA from bodily fluids present in the fingernails.
May I have 1 moment, Your Honor?
Yes.
Briefly, the YSTR results for Laken Riley's fingernails for the right hand that, I may be saying this wrong, so you have to correct me, could exclude Diego Ibarra but could not exclude Argenis Ibarra, correct?
For the right and left, yes.
When you go on to True Allele, and True Allele is able to exclude Argenis Ibarra, and True Allele also excluded Diego Ibarra, does that mean he's excluded?
Yes.
Okay, all right. I believe that is all I have, Your Honor. I will pass the witness.
Thank you, Judge.
Good afternoon, is it Ms. Engel?
Yes.
Okay. So I just want to go through the list again that I heard you talking about. There was the cup in the straw, is that right?
There was a straw in the cup. The straw from the cup.
Okay. The straw is what you tested?
Swabbings from the straw, yes.
Okay. And that had to be tested with True Allele, right?
Yes,
Okay. And the result was a mixture of two people, is that right?
correct.
And I'm just gonna use for right now, just for simplicity's sake, we have a match with Jose Ibarra.
Correct.
And who was the other person who was in that profile?
It's an unknown male individual. I would need a reference sample to match that person.
Okay, so we have two people's DNA on that straw, is that right?
Correct.
Okay. One Jose Ibarra, one we don't know.
Correct.
Okay. And that's a straw that you're using to, I mean, it's like a regular straw you use to drink?
Yes, it's like a styrofoam takeout cup straw.
Okay. And so two people would have had to use that straw in order to
Correct.
get the DNA on it, right?
Correct.
Okay. And we don't know who that other person is.
Correct.
We have the fingernail swabbings, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. On the left and right hand.
Yes.
Okay. And on those, what we start with, when we have what we would assume would be, the reason you use a YSTR is that only male individuals have a Y chromosome, is that right?
Correct.
Okay. And in order to see if you have male DNA in a sample that would otherwise be normally full of female DNA, you're looking for that Y chromosome.
I can tell that there's male DNA from the quantitation step because we also test for male DNA.
Okay.
So I would have to know that the male DNA was present before I amplified with the YSTR kit to find that profile.
Okay. You do that in this situation.
Correct.
Okay. And you get a result that excludes Diego, according to your results.
Correct.
But does not exclude Jose and Argenis.
Correct.
And so there's a match that you make with a YSTR, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. It also doesn't, or I guess the chances of that happening in just the random population is 1 out of every 10,000 people, males, is gonna have that same profile, is that right?
It's approximately 1 in 9,750, yes.
So 1 in 9, it's a match, but 1 in 9,750 is gonna, we'd likely see that repeated, is that right?
Yes, and also paternally related male individuals unless there is a mutation.
Okay, so I'm just gonna make a note of that number, it's 1 in 9,750.
Yes.
Okay. The fingernail swabbings of the left hand, there's no, you can't make a match in that, is that right?
There was also male DNA, so it's the same results as the right hand fingernails.
Okay, is that just the YSTR?
Yes.
Okay. Do you get a true allele result out of the left fingernail?
Yes.
Okay, and what was that?
The true allele was for the right hand swabbings. There was at least 2 individuals. Laken Riley was assumed. The match to Jose Ibarra is approximately 10 billion times more probable than a coincidental match to an unrelated person in the population.
And for the left?
The left, there was, assuming the presence of Laken Riley, due to limited data, no conclusions could be made about the minor contributor.
Okay, so on the left fingernail, we don't have any match, is that right?
Just the assumption that Laken Riley is there and she is.
Okay, not to Jose Ibarra.
Correct.
All right.
Well, except for YSTRs, but yeah, using true allele.
Okay, so we have the Adidas hat.
Yes.
Okay, and there is no match to Jose Ibarra on that hat, is that right?
Correct.
Okay. Do we know whose head that hat came off of?
That would be information from someone else, not.
Okay.
It's not I'm not aware of.
I got you. And we have the rocks and the tree cutting.
Yes.
Okay. Those are, none of those has any of Jose Ibarra's DNA on them, correct?
Correct.
Okay. We would expect for that, if someone were not wearing gloves, or if there were holes in the gloves, would we expect contact DNA in the case?
Not necessarily.
What would it depend on?
Well, it would depend on how much contact they have, the condition of their the palms of their hands.
Okay, and when you say the conditions of their palms of their hands, what do you mean?
If your hands have calluses or dry skin, you're more likely to leave contact DNA than soft palms of your hands.
Okay, if it related to a particular object, would it be how hard you grip that?
That could be
object?
a part, yes.
Okay. And moving on to the gloves in this case. Did you testify about testing number 6 on your?
6 was a complex mixture where no conclusions could be made with traditional DNA testing, so TrueAllele was used.
Okay, and what were the results of number 6?
For number 6, it was the mixture of 2 individuals. The major contributor was Laken Riley, and 100 septillion times more probable than a coincidental match. And again, due to limited data, no conclusions could be made about the minor evidence genotype.
Okay, so that was number 6.
Yes.
All right. Was any of the hair in this case that was recovered by, whether from the autopsy or turned over to the FBI, or the GBI, I'm sorry, was any of the hair tested using any traditional DNA methods or TrueAllele?
No.
Okay. And were the fingernail swabbings taken from Jose Ibarra ever tested?
No.
Okay. Who made that decision?
That would have been management.
Management?
The management of in the section, the
Okay.
forensic biology section.
And who's that?
Jim Sebastian.
Okay. And do you have any notes or any reason for that included in your file?
No.
Would those notes have been made when that decision was made?
That would be up to James Sebastian. So he may or may not have made a note as to what we were testing and why.
Okay. Would Preston Norris have been a part of that decision?
There's Aaron Norris. I don't know of Preston.
Okay. And what about a GBI agent Bayer, or Bayer, B-E-Y-E-R? Would he have been a part of that?
I don't
decision?
know if he was. This was something I was privy to, so I can't say.
Okay. As it relates to items 14D and 14F received by the FBI, or the GBI, I'm sorry. What are those?
They're not on my reports.
Do you have a copy of all of the evidence that was sent to the GBI?
No, I did not.
Okay. Did you ever receive, for testing, a sealed package containing swabs from anyone's abdomen?
They may have been received by GBI, but I did not test those.
Okay. Did you receive any, or test any sealed package containing swabs from an abdomen that would have been dry swabbings?
Again, they may have been received by GBI, but I did not perform that test.
Okay. And did you perform any testing on wet swabs from anyone's neck?
No.
Okay. And were you a part of any decision-making process to not test those items?
I was not.
Okay. Do you know who was?
That would have been, again, the management at GBI, and they may have spoken to other people involved in the investigation.
Okay. But you weren't. You're the head person who's in charge of all of the DNA testing in this case. Is that right?
For this case, but not for GBI.
But for this case?
Yes.
Okay. Were you ever consulted by a Preston Norris or GBI agent Bayer as to whether or not to test those items that we just went over?
No, I was not.
Okay. Aside from the jacket in this case, all of the other matches that you make to Jose Ibarra come through TrueAllele, is that right? And the known sample and the jacket.
Yes.
Okay. And aside from the YSTR.
Yes.
Okay. So the YSTR on the fingernail and the jacket are the only non-TrueAllele matches to Mr. Ibarra, is that right?
Correct.
Okay. On direct, you testified. Actually, let me ask you this. Without TrueAllele, then, you personally could, and setting aside the jacket and the YSTR, without TrueAllele, you could not have made any definitive matches in this case. Is that right?
I could possibly match major contributors, but not minor contributors.
Okay. And when you have the minor contributors and the mixed samples, you have to use TrueAllele, right?
If they're minor, below what we call a threshold, where there could be, it's called a stochastic threshold, we have to use true or little.
Okay. And so aside from the YSTR and the fingernails and the jacket, all of the minor contributors fell below that threshold in this case, correct?
All the minor contributors did, yes.
Okay. So you had to use Trulio for all of those tests?
Correct.
Okay. So I just want to talk to you a little bit. You testified on direct about the reliability and reproducibility of Trulio. And I'd like to just talk to you a little bit about that. What are some of the problems and limitations of Trulio?
Problems and limitations with very low level DNA. We can't make matches, and that's based on our validation. If there is dropout at one of these 21 locations, it could skew the match statistic. That's another issue. We can only look at mixtures between 2 and 5 individuals. Once you get up to 5 individuals, the software could do what's called stalling, where it has a hard time determining the genotypes. That's something we've encountered.
Okay, so, and I'm new to all this, but I think that you went through all the ones that I could find, through my research. And so one of those problems is determining how many contributors there are. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. And any time that you have one of these mixtures of DNA, the scientist has to determine how many contributors there are. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. And what they do is they say, okay, we think that there's 2 or 3 contributors to this particular mixture of DNA.
Yes.
Okay. And you plug in that number of contributors, and then the software runs does its thing.
Yes.
Okay. Depending on how many contributors you decide are in there, will change the probabilities, these likelihood ratios that you testified to before, right?
It will change them, yes. If I say there's 3 individuals, but there's actually 2, then it will spread out those probabilities to those other individuals, and there would be a match, but it would have a lower match likelihood ratio.
Okay. And when you're making those determinations as to how many contributors there are, the opinion on how many contributors there are could differ. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Amongst people who know this stuff, right?
Yes.
Okay. Other experts, for instance.
Yes.
The other thing you talked about is the quantity of the DNA. Are there limits that you can't go below when you're using Trulio?
There's limits we can't go below when we use a traditional testing, so that then applies to TrueAllele as well.
Okay, so are they the same limits between traditional DNA testing and Trulio?
Well, since you start with the traditional, that's a limiting factor.
Okay. Who is that limit set by? Is that GBI?
That's GBI, but it's based on our validation of the global Fowler kit that we used for traditional DNA testing.
Okay. What about cybergenetics validation studies? Do they have a limit that you're not allowed to go under?
I'm not aware of that. It would depend on what the amplification was, but not to my knowledge.
Okay. What about separating out these mixtures if it involves close family relations? Are there any limitations on Trulio about that?
If it's a lower match, you can have false inclusions with family members, but with the match statistics in this case, and also that we had the reference samples of the 2 brothers, I don't believe that had any effect on the results.
Okay. And if we kind of control for these limitations, then Trulio should be perfect, right? It's just running numbers. Is that fair to say?
Well, it is a random process. So then we do run the software 3 requests each, and we must have 2 requests that are concordant. However, we do have instances where those requests, we don't have concordant requests, and we cannot make any conclusions about a mixture.
I don't understand. What does that mean? It can't, like, it's not concordant. I don't understand what that means. Could you explain that?
Concordant mixture weights and concordant genotypes for contributors we must have before we can make any conclusions. They must be concordant in 2 different Trulio requests. So if this doesn't occur, we can't make any conclusions.
Okay. And so if done correctly then, and I think this is maybe what I'm understanding, that Trilio is, you testified that it's reproducible. Is that what you were just saying?
Yes.
Okay. But every time you run it, it's going to have a different number, right? I mean, it's going to give you a different likelihood. These huge numbers that you're using, that every time you run it, the numbers are going to be different, right?
They're going to be slightly different because how TrueLil determines those contributors is a random process.
It's a random process.
Yes, but the results, again, they must be within a certain number of log units or a certain amount difference. There can't be a big difference between the two requests for us to report the results.
If you run one of these tests, one run of this test, 5 minutes later you run a different run of this test, are the numbers going to be the same?
Not exactly.
Okay. So it's not exactly reproducible.
It's reproducible within an approximation.
Okay. Who sets that approximation?
That's based on the validation. We do have an amount that they have to be close to each other in order to report the results.
Okay. So in this case, we're comparing the DNA against kind of 3 different individuals. We've got Jose, we've got Argenis, and we've got Diego. Is that right?
Yes, and Laken Riley.
Okay. And I just want to take the right fingernail clipping and just kind of go through the process here. You've got the YSTR, and that's the first test that you do, right?
Correct.
Okay. And that eliminates Diego as a possibility.
Correct.
All right. And when we go to a true allele test, it says that this is 200 trillion times less probable that it's Argenis. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. But that it's only 1 billion times less probable that it's Diego's.
Correct.
Okay. So that means that according to true allele, it is more likely to be Argenis than it is to be Diego, correct?
Argenis is exclusion number is more than Diego, yes.
So it is. So according to true allele, this is more likely to be Argenis than it is to be Diego.
Yes, but that's more based on the difference in their DNA profiles.
Okay. But you already excluded them with the YSDR, is that right?
I excluded Diego.
Okay. So you excluded Diego, but he's more likely to be the contributor according to true allele.
That's using his DNA reference sample, and it would be based on his profile. It would also be based on how much genetic information he shares with his brother. And so that's not an unexpected result.
Okay. Why do the odds change depending on which test it is in terms of, why is it always 200 trillion times more likely or less likely to be Argenis and 1 billion times less likely to be Diego?
Because you're comparing to their specific reference samples for them, and it's based on how often their genetic information is found in the random population. So someone has genetic information that is found more in the population or less in the population, it can change that number. So it's all based on that they have different DNA profiles, so there's different match results.
Okay. The genetic profiles in this case didn't change though, did they?
The mixture was the same, yes.
Okay. And their reference samples didn't change, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you say it's run against the population. Within the course of this case, the population didn't change that much, did it?
No, it's actually the same database.
Okay. So why is it that the odds change? If for the fingernail, for instance, it's 200 trillion times less probable to be Argenis, and it is 1 billion times less probable to be Diego, why isn't it always 200 trillion and 1 billion?
Because it's based on the comparison of their reference sample to the data.
But we just said that the reference samples haven't changed, right?
Correct.
Okay. And so the population numbers haven't changed, correct?
Correct.
So why does the likelihood change?
Between the two individuals?
Yes, it's always the same DNA that you're plugging in the machine, right?
Yes, but I mean, if they were identical siblings, they would have identical likelihood ratios. But since they're not identical siblings, the numbers are different.
Sure, but the siblings in this case didn't change between 2 tests, did they?
They're different tests with different type of results. The YSTR test
Sure.
has different type of results and a different statistical database than the TrueAllele.
Did you say the YSTR has different database than the TrueAllele?
Yes, the Global Fowler and the TrueAllele have the same database, and the YSTR is a different database.
Right. The 200 trillion and the 1 billion are the straw numbers, correct?
Yes.
Or I'm sorry, the fingernail numbers, correct?
10 billion for Jose Ibarra, 200 trillion, and 1 billion for the brothers.
Okay. And then when we get to the straw, it changes to 10 sextillion and 10 quadrillion, right?
Yes,
Okay. Same reference DNA that you're putting into TrueAllele, right?
yes,
Okay. Same population database that you're using for TrueAllele, right?
yes,
Okay. And the same 3 brothers that you're testing against, right?
correct.
Okay. Why has the number changed from 200 trillion to 10 sextillion as it relates to Arhenis if it's the same DNA that's being put in?
Because it's a different mixture than the fingernails.
Okay. TrueAllele doesn't identify DNA, does it?
It gives a match statistic in the form of a likelihood ratio.
But it doesn't identify DNA, does it?
I don't understand your,
Okay, well, let's take an example, and it relates to number 6, the testing on number 6, okay? The report that you gave and you testified to on direct said that due to limited data, no conclusive determination can be made as minor evidence genotype, is that right?
correct.
Okay, but at least on one attempt at running TrueAllele on this, you did get a result, didn't you? On number 6.
I may have had one of the 3 requests fall above 6%, 4%, but they had to be concordant for me to make a match.
Sure, but you got a result, didn't you?
Yes.
Okay. And that match score was above a 4, right?
I would have to look at the notes.
Right?
Yeah. Totally different question than what I thought you were asking.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
okay. You got a match score above 4.
I got a match when compared to our staff database.
Hold on, who?
We have a staff database that we use of people who are involved in the DNA section and spread out through GBI, investigators, admin. So we compare the TrueAllele results to the staff database.
Okay. So you got my question was you got a result in this when you were running item number 6, correct?
Yes.
Okay. TrueAllele didn't say, we don't know whose DNA this is. I can't give you a result. Is that right? It didn't shut down.
No.
Okay. It gave you a result, and it told you that it had matched who?
It was a random match to a former GBI agent who did not work in the Athens area.
Okay. So that GBI agent didn't work in the lab, did they?
No.
Okay. And you don't have any reason to think that he was a part of this case, do you?
No.
You don't have any reason to think that he handled any of the evidence in this case, do you?
She, but no.
I'm sorry. And what TrueAllele told you on that test was that it was 10,000 times more likely to be this former agent than it was to be a random match. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Is there another way to say that? 1 in 10,000?
10,000 times more probable, yes.
Okay. Why did the software do that?
That was on the contributor who was less than 4%, which is why we don't report less than 4%.
Was the contributor in this less than 4%? What did TrueAllele tell you?
Which sample? I'm now confused.
Number 6.
Well, they would have been compared to the major profile, which would have been Laken Riley, and then the minor profile, which would have been less than 4%.
Okay. On the QC report there, it says that it's over 4%, doesn't it? It's over 4?
The match statistic is over 4.
Okay.
That match statistic, which is the 10,000 times more probable.
Okay. And but the software is running against all of the GBI employees or all the lab employees?
All the ones we have in the database, yes.
Okay. So it's not just considering the 3 contributors that you have, right?
Correct.
Okay. How did this, if we know that this person didn't touch the evidence, didn't work for the lab, how long had they not worked for the lab since?
It's been a few years. They live in a different part of the state.
Okay. In your mind, this is an incorrect result.
It was, but it was to that less than 4% contributor.
Okay. How did it get to this person who was not there, who we know didn't have anything to do with this case? How did the software actually calculate that it was 10,000 times more likely to be this person than a random chase?
It took that person's reference sample and it took the data obtained from that less than 4% contributor, and it issued a likelihood ratio.
Okay.
And since we don't report less than 4% contributors based on our validation, and that we can get some false matches, and that's just because that's the reason we don't report less than 4%.
Because you don't think it's reliable, right?
But less than 4%, it's not. That's why we don't report it.
Okay, but that's what the software itself is doing, is reporting that, correct?
You can still look and see if someone matches even if it's less than 4%.
Okay, and so it was you who considered that an error, not the software.
It was a technical leader who saw that as a false match, so we just went ahead and reported it. It's inconclusive. No conclusions could be made less than that 4%.
That's all the question I have.
What's the validation?
Validation is when we test software before we use it on casework to make sure it works properly.
And have you at the GBI tested the TrueAllele program, and have you validated TrueAllele?
Yes, we have.
How long was that process?
It was several years.
And in the several years that you all validated the TrueAllele program, did you create a threshold within the GBI that you do not call TrueAllele results?
Correct.
What is that threshold?
Less than 4%.
Okay. And why don't you call results less than 4% at the GBI?
Because we didn't go down that far in our validation. And once you start getting less than 4%, there may be some of the 21 locations may be missing information. So it will actually use the population database to help fill in the blanks where it's missing information. So it's just not reliable.
And that's why you don't call it?
Correct.
And so in any of the results that we have talked about in this case, specifically the right fingernails of Laken Riley, which is a mixture between only Jose Ibarra and Laken Riley, was that below 4%?
No.
Are those reliable results?
Yes.
And were those results produced through your, are they reliable based upon your validation of TrueAllele?
Correct.
And TrueAllele does have an error rate, a demonstrated error rate, is that right?
It has a range where we don't report results, yes, for the match statistics.
And so I want to break that down. Does that mean that you all know what the error rate is of TrueAllele, correct?
Yes.
And you don't call matches below that threshold, is that right?
Yes.
So that you compensate for the error rate.
Yes.
And so this 4% that he just asked you about is not a reported result, correct?
It isn't.
And because it's not reliable, is that correct?
Correct.
And that would be consistent with what you all do every day at the GBI, and that's why you validate this software, right?
Yes.
So going to back to the fingernails and the statistics versus YSTR and the statistics versus TrueAllele and which brother is more excluded than the other, both brothers, Argenis and Diego, have been excluded as potential donors underneath the fingernails by TrueAllele.
Correct.
It doesn't matter at what level they're excluded.
Correct.
The determination of the number of contributors in a sample that is ran in TrueAllele, who does that?
I do that.
How do you do that?
I do that based on looking at the data called an electropherogram. If one person should have no more than 2 peaks at each of these 21 locations, or no more than 2 pieces of genetic information. So we look at each of the location, the number of peaks, the imbalance between peak heights in case people share genetic information, and we use that to determine the number of contributors.
And did you determine the number of contributors in this case correctly?
There is an at least caveat that we use, but I believe I did.
And when you run results in TrueAllele, do you run it more than once?
Yes.
And why do you run it more than once?
To make sure we have concordant genotypes and mixture weights.
And so from what I heard defense counsel asking you, that if you run it more than once and you get different numbers, does that mean it is unreliable?
No.
Why not?
Because it's a random process, so it may assign slightly different probabilities to different possible genotypes. So based on that, it can change slightly the match statistic.
And I heard you use the word concordant. What does concordant mean?
Concordant is generally having the same results as far as possible genotypes at each of the 21 locations.
And when you ran the TrueAllele results in this case, the data in this case, were all of the data that was generated, was all of the data concordant?
It had to be concordant to be reported, so yes.
So if it wasn't concordant, it would not be reported, right?
Correct.
On the rocks and trees that you were asked about would you expect to see somebody else's DNA on the rocks, for example? The rocks in this case had the DNA of only one person on them, is that right?
Correct.
And that only one person on the rocks was Laken Riley.
Correct.
There was no other foreign profile on those rocks, right?
On the parts that were sampled, yes.
Because you swabbed them, correct?
The serologist swabbed them.
Katrina swabbed them. And you were asked about that and those results. Does that mean no one ever touched those rocks?
No,
Okay. Does that mean that Laken Riley hit herself in the head with those rocks?
no.
Okay. And why not?
Just because the DNA of another individual is present doesn't mean they never touched the rocks.
Doesn't mean you always leave a DNA behind when you touch something, right?
Yeah, the saying absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, so it's consistent with that.
The sexual assault kit, which I failed to ask you about, did you test the sexual assault kit of Laken Riley's that was done at autopsy by Dr. DeMarco?
Yes, it was tested.
And what were your results there?
There was a male screening performed to look for the presence of male DNA on the vaginal vault swabs, the anus peri-anus swabs, and the oral cavity swabs of Laken Riley. The testing failed to reveal the presence of human male DNA.
And why not just test everything in every single case?
Because we have limited resources at the Georgia Bureau of Investigation.
And I heard lots of questions to you about what was tested, what was not tested. Is it your decision to decide what is tested and what is not tested?
No.
Okay. And you told us that would be a decision made by your manager, Jim Sebastian?
Yes.
In conjunction with other people?
Correct.
Who are not you?
Yes.
One moment, Your Honor. That's all I have, thank you.
Very briefly, Judge, what does a match score above 4 mean?
Match score above 4, based on our validation, that's when we start reporting a match. Below that, you could have false inclusions or exclusions.
Okay, so a match score above 4 means that you have reached the threshold above which the validation studies are good, right?
Yes, for samples that are at least 96% of the mixture.
Okay, and on that sample, number 6, your quality control report says it is a match score above 4, correct?
Yes.
Okay. It wasn't reported because it wasn't reproducible, correct?
It wasn't reported because it was determined to be a false match to data that did not meet the requirements of our validation for us to report as reproducible.
Thank you, Judge.
Anything else?
No, sir.
You should be excused.
Yes, sir.
Any objection, Mr. Kirby?
No, Judge.
You're excused. Any other evidence, Ms. Ross?
Your Honor, at this time, the state of Georgia rests.
Is there one? State is rested. Is Mr. Ibarra ready for me to ask him questions about his decision to testify or not?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Mr. Ibarra, Ms. Smith, I don't know what's going to work best because I'm going to be asking these questions directly to him. All right. Okay. Mr. Ibarra, I'm asking these questions directly to you.
Señor Ibarra, le voy a hacer esta pregunta directamente a usted.
You understand that you have a right to testify, and if you want to testify, no one can prevent you from doing so.
Usted tiene el derecho a testificar, si decide testificar, nadie puede tomar eso en contra suya, ¿comprende? ¿Comprende? Yes, sir.
Do you understand that no one can make or compel you to testify?
Nadie puede obligarlo a usted, o compelerlo a que usted testifique, ¿comprende esto? Yes, Your Honor.
Do you understand that you have a right to not testify if you do not want to?
Usted tiene el derecho a no testificar si no desea testificar, ¿comprende esto? Yes, sir.
Do you understand that not your lawyer, but you personally are the one that decides whether you will testify or not?
La decisión de testificar o no testificar no es de sus abogados, sino de usted personalmente, ¿comprende esto? Yes, Your Honor.
Do you understand if you do not testify, then the court will instruct myself that it's not to be held against you? Typically, I would tell a jury that.
Si usted decide no testificar, la corte se diría a sí misma que usted no estaría obligado a hacerlo y no tomaría eso en contra suya, ¿comprende esto? Yes, Your Honor.
You understand if you choose to testify, you'll be examined by your counsel and cross-examined by the district attorney.
Si usted decide testificar, usted sería confrontado y preguntado por su propio abogado y por la fiscalía como tal, y por la corte, ¿comprende esto? Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Ibarra, do you want to testify?
Señor Ibarra, ¿desea usted testificar? No, sir.
Anything from counsel regarding that decision, and can you say if you believe he understands his rights to testify or not, Mr. Donovan?
Yes, we believe he understands his rights, and we don't have anything else to add to his response.
If the defendant decided to not testify with a complete understanding of his rights.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Beck, any evidence?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. You may proceed.
The defense calls Joseph Clementi to the stand.
Clementi. Mr. Clementi up here.
Would you please raise your right hand? Do you swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Please take a seat. I'd like to start by asking you to state and then spell your name for our court reporter.
Joseph Clementi, Josephclementi.
And Mr. Clementi, what do you do for a living?
I work at a music management company.
And where do you live?
I live in Athens, Georgia.
Were you living in Athens, Georgia in February of this year?
I was.
Mr. Clementi, do you sometimes take exercise by going for runs?
I do.
And did you take a run on the morning of February 22nd?
Yes, I did.
Did you, after finding out about this case, contact the police about what you had observed on your run?
Yes, I did.
Do you remember approximately when you contacted police?
I believe it was the day after February 22nd, so February 23rd.
And you met with UGA police officers?
I didn't meet with them, we just had a call.
Okay. So you had a phone interview with the police officers?
Yes.
And then afterwards, you sent them some pictures to kind of clarify what you had said on the phone call?
That's correct.
Okay. So I want to just ask for you to briefly recap when you ran and what you saw, please.
Sure. So I started my run at 9:39 a.m. on Thursday, and I ran for, I believe, 36 minutes. And I ran around Lake Herrick, starting at the intramural fields, and I ran for 3.5 miles. And what I noted to the police officers was that I saw an individual that was wearing dark clothing and seemed out of the ordinary.
So let's kind of break that down. You started running at 9:39. How do you know that time?
I tracked my run with a running app called Nike Run Club.
And so when you were reporting to the police when you were running, you were comparing to that Nike Run Club?
That's correct.
Okay. And then you said you saw an individual around Lake Herrick at the intramural fields. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And did you prepare for the police a sort of a screenshot of the area with a star where you saw this individual?
That's correct.
Okay, I am going to show it to you, and this is going to be marked as defense 6. Let me show it to stick. Mr. Clementi, do you recognize the document I handed you?
Yes, I do.
And what is it?
It's a map of Lake Herrick, and there's a star placed on where I said I saw the individual, and one of the pictures has an arrow, which is where I was describing that the individual was walking.
Okay. At this time, Your Honor, I'd like to move defense exhibit 6 into evidence.
Any objection?
No, sir.
Submitted.
Mr. Clementi, the state has entered a large map of the area, so I'm going to turn around and see if you can kind of put where you marked on this little mini map in context of this big map, okay?
Sure.
So, Mr. Clementi, do you see over here at the top left side of the board where it says Lake Herrick?
Yes.
And can you say where on this map you would have seen the individual?
By the retention pond.
And do you see the retention pond marked on this map?
I do.
And where is it?
It's in the southwest corner.
Your Honor, may he briefly come down just to point to where he saw the individual?
Right.
Come on
You
down.
take that corner away. So you see that right here to your left?
Silver corner. So for the record, you're pointing to the north of the retention pond?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you also said you saw it moving. With your pointer, can you just kind of indicate the direction?
Sure. So there's the trail that's going around here, and then it curves, and the individual is going that way.
Did you get that, Madam Reporter? Okay. Thank you. You can have a seat, Mr. Clemente. Why did this individual catch your attention?
He was not in typical athletic gear, which at that time that I was running, everyone was pretty much running or hiking that I was passing, and the individual was wearing very dark clothing, and they seemed to be wandering kind of aimlessly.
And you said you started your run at 9:39. What time did you see this individual?
In between 9:46 and 9:48.
And again, how are you so certain about what time you saw this individual?
Using the Nike Run Club app, I can pace. I know my pacing during that time, and so I can see 7 minutes into my run where I was exactly on the map.
Okay. And so you used the map and Nike Run Club to come up with this 2-minute window where you saw the individual?
Yeah, yeah, it shows me where.
And the last question I have for you, you say dark clothing. Can you give any specifics as to what dark clothing you saw?
I really just remember just black or dark bluish clothing, and that there was either a hood or a hat on this person.
Just one moment, Mr. Clemente. I neglected to ask you, Mr. Clemente. Can you describe the height and the build of the person you saw?
It was the person had a more masculine build, and based on that, I thought it was a man, and they were probably above 5'9".
Did you notice, or could you tell if they were slender or more chubby?
Their weight didn't really stand out to me. Yeah.
That's fine. Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon, how are you?
Hey, good.
Could you identify this person if you saw them again?
No.
Did you see this person's face?
Not really, no.
Do you know what race this individual is?
No, I don't.
Could this be a white male?
Yes.
Could be a black male?
Yeah.
Could be a Hispanic male?
Mm-hmm.
Could be an Asian male?
Yeah.
Did you notice if this individual was wearing gloves or anything?
No, I don't really remember or recall.
And what kind of look did you get of this individual? How long did you look at this person?
Sorry?
How long did you look at this person?
I mean, it was really a split second, but they seemed, like I said, they seemed to be kind of aimlessly wandering.
And you noticed a hooded sweatshirt, you said?
Yes, or a hat. Their head was covered by something.
And khaki colored pants?
Yeah, I wasn't totally sure what. I remember their dark clothing really stood out to me on the torso above.
Okay. What about the pants?
I don't really recall totally what color they were.
Could they have been khaki colored pants? And do you recall giving a statement to Detective Ray Boo, the University of Georgia Police Department?
Yes, I do, yeah.
And do you recall using the word khaki with her?
Yes, I do.
Okay, and khaki to describe, first of all, what color is khaki? For the record? What is khaki?
Beige.
Beige, okay. And what khaki did you see?
What khaki pants?
On this individual.
Oh, like beige coloring on their pants.
Okay. And you were asked about whether there may have been any logos on this individual's clothing. Do you remember that?
I do remember being asked about that.
And do you remember saying that there may have been a white logo on this individual's clothing?
Yes, there may have been.
And do you recall describing this individual as skinny?
I do remember.
And over 5'9" tall?
Yes.
Okay. And to this day, you do not know the race of that person?
No.
And you would not be able to identify that person if you saw them again?
Correct.
That's all I have.
When you said there could have possibly been a white logo, do you recall if that was on the hat or the jacket or where that would have been?
No, I don't recall.
Okay. I don't have any other questions.
Yes.
You be excused?
Yes, sir.
You're excused. Your next witness.
Your Honor, may we briefly finish on this witness?
Yes. I hesitate to say this. They want about 10 minutes to talk about something. I know. If you need to stand up, go somewhere, that's fine. 10 minutes, thank you.